다빗의 견해는 항상 많은 관심을 끌어왔습니다. 그가 S&P 500이 6천에 도달할 것이라고 예측했을 때 일부 사람들은 그를 비웃었습니다. 오늘 우리는 그가 현재 S&P 및 시장에 대해 어떻게 생각하는지 알아볼 것입니다. 여전히 혼란스러워하며 시장에 진입하지 않은 사람들이 많이 있습니다. S&P 500 및 나스닥 같은 주요 지수에 대한 당신의 현재 시장 전망은 무엇이며 이전 목표와 어떻게 비교됩니까?
Yeah, I've been a big bull, as you know, been probably the bull on the street for the last couple of years. I turned right at the bottom in October 2022. Actually, was bullish before that, but said I think we hit a bottom that day, and it reversed and never looked back. And I've remained with targets that are way above anybody else on the street for a long time. As you say, coming out of October 22, I was at 6,000. I raised my target to 7,000 on the S&P back in January of this year, and raised my target on the NASDAQ from 20,000 to 23,000. I have since raised my NASDAQ target to 24,000. So, pretty steep run from here, in my opinion. I have a 55,000 target on the Dow, which is up from 48,000. And my biggest call is I have a target of 3,300 on the Russell 2000. So that one people have a hard time with because the Russell's been the laggard. But I think you're going to see a big catch-up rally there. And basically from here, it's 50%. So, and I do believe these numbers, I always tell people I'm not tied to the end of the year. I don't give year-end targets. They're really cycle targets. It's the top of what I think is a 42-year secular bull market that started back in August of 1982. So whether it happens, in November, December, January, I don't really care. It's, I'm not going to worry about whether I call it quite that precisely, but I do think there's a real possibility it could be this year that we get there. If we don't get to the final top this year, we'll be darn close. A big part of it will be this year. So, that's a big run from here, and I think probably not the Russell, but I think for the S&P, my number is conservative. So I think it could even exceed that. So I haven't raised it yet, but I'm toying with the idea that I may have to raise that one. So I think it's going to be, I think tech has had a big correction after their great run. Semis have had a big correction. I think they're in gear, and you're going to see those groups lead the market up. So they're going to be joined by a lot of other groups. So it's no longer going to be the case that people can say it's a narrowly based rally. It's not good quality. I think you're going to find that it's a very broad rally into the top. So cyclicals will play, value will play. I think semis, the SMH is maybe 240 now. I think that can get to 400. So there's plenty of upside there. The Mag 7, I think, will continue to be leaders. But at the same time, I think you're going to see industrials play. You're going to see home builders play. You're going to see the materials play. The copper looks great. You're also going to see things like financials play. So the area that I don't like is the energy area, the oil, XLE. XLE, I think, is going to lag a lot. It could actually go down, but if it doesn't go down, it's going to at least not be performing very well.
그렇다면 에너지 부문이 부진한 이유는 무엇인가요?
Well, as much as I've been the bull on the street for equities, I've been the bear on the street for oil ever since it hit 130. WTI oil here hit 130 during the invasion of Ukraine, and then never looked back, never saw that level again. So around 120, I think I said you could see it back down to 85. And then as it got down under 100, I said you could see it down into the 60s. We got down into the 60s a couple times in the last year, and most recently, maybe in the last month. I think it's going to roll over here and probably go to 60 and maybe through 60. So that's really what's driving it. There's a surplus of oil out there. The economy, the world economy is not great. You know, it's chugging along at a very low rate, and in some cases in recession already. And I think next year I'm calling for a global bust. So, you know, demand for energy is just going to continue to weaken. And meanwhile, supply is, you know, certainly decent. So I'm a bear on oil for this cycle. I think it's had its run, and I'm a huge bull on oil post bust. You know, in the 26 to 30 period, 2026 to 30, I have oil going as high as $500.
뭐라고요?
Yeah, I think oil can get down to 30 in the bust. And then, you know, once you're going to have a huge response to a global bust. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but you're going to see a huge response from all the central banks around the world, because global bust means big financial crisis, maybe worse than 2008-9 for many countries. I mean, so you're going to have banks failing across the globe, and the central banks are going to have no answer for that other than money. You will see, I've said this for a while, I think you will see, we saw 5 trillion in QE out of the Fed in response to the pandemic back in 2020. I think you'll see 20 trillion this time. That's just the Fed. So, and proportionally, every central bank.
말씀하신 것 중 일부는 2026년에서 2030년 사이에 일어날 글로벌 불황과 관련된 것이었는데, 제 머릿속에서는 지금 한편으로는 파티가 계속되고 있는 것 같은데, 또 다른 한편으로는 모든 것이 곧 무너질 것 같다고 느껴집니다. 이를 조금 더 풀어서 설명해 주시겠어요?
As I said, I jumped ahead a lot. So, just to slow down a little bit on the time, I think I'm calling this a melt up. This final stage of this 42-year secular bull market will probably be over, if not this year, and I think it could be this year, sometime in the first quarter of next year. And to say that the market can go up 30 to 50% from here, I have to allow for the fact that it's not going to happen in 3 or 4 months. I think it could, because it's going to be a parabolic run, but I have to allow for the fact that it might push to 4 or 5 months. So it'll either be in the fourth quarter or the first quarter. Following that will be this global bust, and it's a global bust refers to the economy and the financial system. But it'll be accompanied by a bear market that I think in the US will be something on the order of 80% peak to trough. 80%. So just using my targets right now, if the S&P tops out at 7,000, I'm saying it could get down to 1,400.
그렇다면 이는 대공황과 비슷한 수준인가요?
In 1929, we had a 90% peak to trough drop. This won't be probably quite that big, but it could be 70 or 80%. And why? Because when I say global bust, I'm using a term to differentiate from anything we've had in the post-World War II era. Even 2008-9 was not a bust. It came close, but a global bust is really the system is breaking apart. It's in free fall. We almost got there in October of 2008. The Fed acted, and the Fed and the government acted pretty quickly from that point and prevented us from going over that cliff into a bust. I'm saying this time they won't act fast enough, partly because of 2008 and everything that's happened since then. And that is, we don't want to do QE to infinity anymore. You know, we're done with that. We learned our lesson. We're not going to do that anymore. It's easy to say that until you're faced with a free-falling financial system.
네, 저도 그 부분에 동의합니다. 그런데 지금은 시장이 상승하는 중이라고 하셨습니다. S&P 500이 7천에 도달할 가능성이 있다고 하셨고, 지금이 바로 투자할 시점이라고 말씀하시는 것 같습니다. 지금이 단기적 상승 국면이라는 말씀 맞나요?
Absolutely right. What I like to say is I am forecasting markets. I'm certainly not giving advice. I can't do that. But I'm also not, everybody has to kind of look at their own abilities, their own risk preferences and tolerance. The likelihood for most people, and there's plenty of exceptions, but for most people, they're most bullish at the top and most bearish at the bottom. So October of 2022, everybody was sure we were going down. If we go to 7,000, if we go to 24,000 on the NASDAQ, I can almost guarantee you that all those institutions that were bearish, 100% will go. When the market's at 7,000, it'll be a double from 3,500 in 2022. So where they're bearish at half that price, they'll be all in. And so will most retail investors. So what I'm telling people is, yeah, you can say, hey, this is too risky for me. It's too fast markets. I can't go in and get out 3 months later. That's fine. Absolutely. I'm telling you, there's a horrible bear market to follow. So yeah, that's fine. But know yourself, because you may get out. You may say, I'm out and I'm going to stay out now. But if you get another 1,500 points on the S&P, you're going to feel like I'm missing something. And at the top, the narrative is going to be very bullish. People, there's a lot of skepticism around the market right now. Even, most of the strategists on the street are telling you there's not much upside left. It's a high value market. And those same people are going to have a rationale. They're going to have a narrative at 7,000 on the S&P that is going to say, there's a long runway ahead, that this market has legs, that it can run for a couple more years because the Fed's easing. Know what the rhetoric's going to be. You have to, the saying over here is, when Wayne Gretzky, who was a great hockey player, used to be playing, it was, how are you so great? And he goes, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. So you have to think ahead and know yourself. So by my forecast is not an endorsement of any investment approach or advice. It's just saying this is what I expect the markets to do.